we should have coffee with us, right?
Yes, that is a prerequisite. So if you've got your coffee, you can show it off. I'm one of those strange iced coffee people, but both. All right, we've got about 77 people in with us right now. I think our max is 100. So the people who show up on time get in the room and the rest have to wait. So it's good to see all of you. It's very strange circumstances. I know that if we had coffee with the principal in Trussell Hall, be able to be here, and I'm really happy that you could make it today. We are in some difficult times, very unpredictable times. Things change by the moment. And what I hope to get out of today was to get a chance to not only answer your questions, but to talk to you a little bit about where we've been, kind of how we got here, what we've done in the short term, what our plans are for the long term, and then to answer any questions that you guys have. So are there any burning questions before we start out, or do you want me to give you a little background about where we've been so far?
Background.
Okay, you got it. All right. So I'll start out right now and talk to you a little bit about where we've been. We have been following the coronavirus situation essentially since we got back from winter break. And we had a number of meetings, and we've talked to health officials, we've talked to school officials about what to do with it. When we got in the beginning of March, things started to get a little serious in the sense that there were outbreaks and problems in Washington State. And we met frequently with health officials and school officials to figure out what we needed to do about it. And as late as March 12th, the guidance from the health officials and the guidance from the school officials was, hey, keep your schools open. It's too disruptive and too unhealthy to send kids to their parents and disrupt the school environment. Well, about 12 hours after that, we got different guidance. And that different guidance was really that we had 5 cases of coronavirus in the county at the time. And the guidance at the time was, in order for all of us to flatten the curve, I'm sure you have heard that we needed to distance folks. And so that was when the decision was made very abruptly on March 13th to shut schools down. We had an emergency meeting with our school board. The school board gave authority for us to shut our school down, and within 24 hours, 80% of the schools in the state of California had shut their doors, including San Pasqual. And since that time, they're up to 99% of the districts in the state. So we are not alone in dealing with this, but we are dealing with it somewhat differently. Folks, when we ended up realizing that our school was shut down, the school board took action around 12:30 on Friday the 13th, which had lived up to its name, luckiness of the day. And we ended up notifying parents within about a half hour when the decision was made that school was going to be closed. And we set the date for April 14th for our return. In that time frame, we used the weekend to develop a 4-point plan on how we're going to continue to educate kids. Because the biggest concerns that we had were, number one, kids who needed meals, are they going to get meals? And the Escondido Union School District did a really good job. Currently, there's 8 locations where meals are being served. And then secondarily, are kids going to continue to be? And so we put a 4-point plan in with our teachers to basically identify the resources to continue online learning, to develop a structure, a platform, to communicate that to you, and then to deliver it. And we were probably the only school around, the only school that I know of, that on that Monday, we brought our teachers in. They socially distanced in the barn. It was a very peculiar meeting where we had teachers sitting about 10 feet from one another. But in that day, I gave them the challenge to say, our kids, we owe it to our families to continue the education. And the teachers stepped up to that challenge. And by the end of the afternoon, we had created a learning plan for all grades. And that was shared with them on Tuesday morning. So unlike a lot of our neighboring districts who essentially provided resources and not much else, our teachers were actively involved from the beginning. And so I hope you've noticed that. One of the charges that we put towards them, though, was to be innovative, be engaging, but don't put added stress or burden on families. And so some people are feeling, hey, I have a million things to do. I don't really know what to do. That was by design, in the sense that we wanted to provide a lot of options. We wanted to provide ways that kids could be engaged at home, wanted to provide a way that teachers could work to their strengths and be able to continue learning in a way that is so unlike anything that we've ever done before. And so hopefully that is working. The challenge that we have right now, though, we're kind of getting to the next phase of things. That phase essentially established our first 3 weeks up until spring break, and that time ends at the end of next week. So the questions that came through, I asked some of you to submit some questions to us. The burning questions are kids coming back on the 14th? And the short answer I can tell you is probably not. It has been determined for sure. LA Unified has extended their date to May 1st. San Diego Unified has extended their date till April 27th to start providing distance learning. We're way ahead of that. We're already doing that with you guys right now. So the indication, the 2 largest school districts are already pushing their dates back. We have a meeting, myself, others in the county and health officials on Tuesday afternoon. And I fully expect to have a discussion then as far as, is it safe to come back? And if it's not safe to come back, what's our decision? So our plans right now, we're really moving into phase 2 of our plans as far as how we respond to things. And in that phase 2 of our plans, what we're looking at is, what is it going to look like for the long haul? And we don't know if that long haul is going to be until May. We don't know if that long haul is going to be to the end of the school year. But the current situation that we have set up, although resources are provided, it doesn't have the structure to it. And I think we just maxed out our full room. We'll see if we can get any more than 100. And I think we're good. So you guys are the lucky few. So what is it going to look like after we get to April 14th, April 15th? And our goal right now is to continue providing a learning environment for your kids outside of the school environment, but to do so in a more structured way. We've been doing since we kind of got the indication that this is going to last longer than we had hoped, is we've ordered additional Chromebooks. We plan to deploy those for at-home use. We'll start that formal deployment when we get back from our scheduled spring break. We've already deployed about 20 devices out so far. We've purchased an online program for use in the middle school. It's a program called Acellus, and we were looking at it because it does a really good job of accelerating learning and remediating learning, and it's a blended model that doesn't kick the teacher to the side, but allows the teacher to facilitate with students. We very well may use that kindergarten through 8th grade. It's designed to go all the way down into preschool, but we aren't 100% sure on the elementary yet. But we are committed to providing a structured program so that at home, there is something that they can go on that can be monitored simultaneously by teachers and parents, and we can have some clearer understanding about what the expectations are. We had some questions that came in that says, what date are you reevaluating a date back to school? And that is very likely going to come after Tuesday of next week, but sometime next week to let you know what the plans are. It also, we had some other question in here. So there was a question on this about, will there be grades? Many of you who have kids in the high school have received a message that they are not assigning grades to anyone for the rest of the school year. And we will have accountability, but I'm not sure if it's going to be grades. Kindergarten through 5th grade, TK through 5th grade is pretty easy because we grade them not on an ABC, we grade them on their progress towards standards. And that is something that we'll still be looking at when kids are at home, is how are they progressing? How are they learning? Because that's really the most important piece of it. The middle school kids, when we start looking at middle school, where they traditionally receive their ABCs, we're looking at making sure that they're accountable to it It might be letter grades, A, B, C. We may decide to do some standards-based grades or some pass-fails, but there will be an accountability as far as what the expectation is for them, what we want them to be doing, and how well we know if there was some additional questions along those lines that came in that said something like, if school doesn't resume, so if we're in this for the long haul, will kids carry on to the next grade? Will class time have to be made up over the summer, like a snow day? Will kids be ready for the to answer those questions, the governor, when the governor made these proclamations about school closures, the governor did waive the 175-day minimum school year requirement. And what that means is that there's not a intent at this moment for school districts to continue in the summer and to make up those grades. Along those lines, though, there is that question: are they going to be ready, and are they going to promote? A lot of this is going to depend on when we come back and how effective we are with our home delivery system. I fully expect that some kids will thrive in this home delivery environment. The program that we're looking to purchase is one that can take kids all the way up to college level. So there's a lot of options for them to accelerate their learning, and I expect that some will. I also expect that some will not. And part of that will be at-home learning isn't for everyone, as you guys can tell, and the folks that I can see on the screen right now, there's a lot of distractions at home. There's a lot of things that take you away from a traditional learning. So some kids won't do well that way, and the other challenge is some won't have the same resources. A big discussion, and one of the reasons why many schools have shied away from trying to provide a home learning program has to do with access and equitability. Meaning, does everyone have the same access to technology? Is it an equitable learning environment, especially if kids have special needs? And how are they addressing that? And our charge has been, we are not going to ignore all kids because we can't make things exactly the same. Our goal is to serve each and every kid the best that we can. So we've had kids that don't have technology. We've had staff members who have driven out to their house and they've delivered resources. We have kids that don't have computers and we've checked them out. And like I said before, we've purchased 100 more to start checking out more wholesale. So that environment at home, things will never be the same from door to door, house to house, neighborhood to neighborhood. But our goal is to give each kid the opportunity to learn and each kid the opportunity to access that learning in the most meaningful way. When we return back to school, whenever that's going to be, that's kind of our phase 3, whether that's sometime this year or it's the beginning of next year. We're going to be looking at phase 3 being, okay, let's assess where we're at. Let's take a look at which kids benefited and which kids didn't. And in that assessment piece, we're gonna have to change some things up a little bit. One of the reasons that we're excited about the program that we've chosen is it allows kids to accelerate and allows them to remediate, and it's a good blended model with the teacher. And we expect that to be one of our tools when we get back to school. The challenge for this here right now is there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of things that we're working on that we're literally figuring out because it's never happened before. We've never been charged with taking a school that is built to have kids at it and to send them home and expect them to learn. But I am fully confident that when we're all said and done, we are going to be better at doing our job than we ever were. We've pushed teachers further than they have ever been pushed before in a shorter amount of time, and they've stepped up to it. I kind of equated it when I talked to my wife about it. It's kind of like when you play the Chutes and Ladders game and you get that big tall ladder at the beginning. You weren't ready to go there right away, but you'll take it. And we are pushing the teachers up that ladder and pushing you guys a little bit too. I know this is a really difficult time, absent having your kids home, just dealing with what's going on in the world. And I really appreciate the fact that you guys have stepped up, that you guys have taken your kids' learning seriously, and the fact that we've crashed out the room here with over 100 people shows that people want some answers and they want to be involved. And so let me answer a few more questions that came in, and then we'll open it up to any other questions that you guys might have. Over here. We had an additional question that says, if San Francisco Union is reopened this year, will adults outside the school be permitted to come on campus, including drop-offs? And so what I believe that's talking about is, will we allow workers to come to the school or outside folks to the school, and what might they bring? That'll be some guidance from the health department that we get. If we open up our school, it'll depend on what conditions that we open up under. So if it's safe to do so, and that's going to be our kind of our guide, if it's safe to do so, we will. So there was a question about whether we would allow people to come in. Another question came up and said, if school was reopened and parents wanted to continue to keep their kids at home, would we provide supports for that? And the answer is, of course we would. And quite honestly, we'll be better equipped to do that than we ever have. Depending on when this turns, kids and parents and staff members are all going to have reservations about health. If they're told you can't be at school because it's not safe one day, and then the next day it is safe, people are going to question, is it real? We've taken a ton of actions at school. In addition to all the learning stuff that I told you guys we did, our maintenance and our facilities crew was in there, and they disinfected the entire campus. We'll have them do that again prior to return, whenever that's going to be, so that people feel that we've taken the steps that we needed to make sure that the campus is safe. But if there's some people that feel that that is not a good place, or they're hesitant to come back, we'll continue to provide the at-home learning for your kids as well. I'm gonna take a look into our room here. We've got some folks in the chat room. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat, and then we'll open it up to you guys. There's a question that says, can we submit questions here? The answer is yes, please do. There's a good question here that says, what about summer school for kids to catch up? And that's one thing that we're looking at for our online program, is to see what versatility we can have to continue offering some education over the summer. So it would not look like a summer school that would be all kids would be mandated to come, but we would look at where are we at and what can we provide folks. It's the state and the federal government have talked a lot about funding for schools and funding schools for the additional expenses of trying to transition to online and providing these extra things. So that would sort of dictate our staffing levels, but we are definitely looking at how do we remediate or mitigate that this time? Because no matter how well we do on the school side, no matter how well you do on the parent side, it's not like them being in class, you know, each and every day. And so we know there's going to be some gaps in there. We have a question that says, how will we ensure that every student's on the same page as far as expectations? And so that is where, when we get back from the break, we're meeting with teachers. We met with our teacher leadership group yesterday, and that was the exact question we put on the table. And part of that answer is, let's get some online curriculum that can be the backbone to this. And then we start talking about what is the expectations that you would have of teachers, and what do teachers have of students. And those conversations were things like, what sort of direct delivery? Are teachers going to do so many Zoom meetings a week? Or there was also talking about availability, teachers having office hours and times where you could talk. So we are, like I said, jumped into this with both feet very quickly, and we're learning a lot. But now is the time that if we're going to turn this to the long haul, or at least with the expectation that it could be the long haul, it's structuring that a little bit. So you should see some information prior to the spring break as far as what we expect some of that to look like. Looking at questions, are kids able to get books and workbooks from their classroom desks? Good question, and the answer is yes. What we've been doing with our resources is we deployed resources virtually, and virtually everyone was able to access them. But there were some people that weren't, or there were some learning materials at school that would be better suited for them to be working on at home. And so we do have a small number of staff that goes in and stays 6 feet apart, and we can get materials that either can be picked up at the school site, or we can deliver it to you. So if there's some specific things feel free to contact me directly or me or Pamela, and we can kind of arrange for some of those materials. We have another question that says, how do you ensure that the different teachers are consistent to ensure parents with multiple kids are getting a consistent education? I'm seeing extreme variance in expectations at this point. Part of that was by design out of the initial gate. One of the things I told teachers was that we have a tremendous opportunity to be innovative right now. And we were asking them to do bold things. And what you're seeing is some teachers have done really bold things, and some teachers are still figuring it out. Part of my job is to get them up to a base level so that there's a level of expectation you have of all of our teachers. Some are going to be dynamos. Some are going to go hit it out of the park, go through the roof, and put some things together. My goal is that we have a consistent enough so that each kid gets what each kid needs. But in this sort of time of innovation, you're going to see some teachers that are doing some fabulous things. And there's some things that we can expect of all. And there are some things that you'll see in a few. But you should be able to be seeing some more consistency in the delivery on the backside of the scheduled spring break if we're not back at school. Question, if school is canceled or distance learning for the rest of the year, will kids come to pick up their things from their classroom? I've been seeing other schools do this and are curious. Yes, I would be hesitant to have them come get all their stuff until we're sure that we're not coming back. I am hopeful that we're coming back sometime this year. I am not optimistic it's going to be on April 14th, but I'm hopeful we're getting back. There are some things, especially for our 8th graders, that you only get one chance to do. And we want our 8th graders to promote. We want our kids to have their dances. We want their kids to have the sports and all that kind of stuff that's on hold right now. So I'm hopeful that we're getting back. I'm not overly optimistic. I would anticipate that the next message you get from me next week that has to do with our time frame will probably put it out as an indefinite return as opposed to some date that we put out there. Like I said, I don't know for sure, but what I'm seeing and what we're getting from health officials and school officials is that it's going to be a little bit longer than that April time frame. Looking at some questions here. This says, it seems that the federal government, the state, and medical professionals are landing in different places to the potential health risks. Ultimately, which authority does the school district gauge their response from? Good question, because there's a lot of different motives. Our closure wasn't due to imminent harm to our students. When we closed our school, there were 5 kids in the entire county 5 individuals in the entire county that have been diagnosed with coronavirus. This morning, there were 297 and 6 of them were in Escondido. So the threat right now to us directly is much greater than it was when school closed. The idea of closing school was to support the governor's initiative of getting people to socially distance and flattening the curve of the disease. It's unclear as to when we're going to get to a point where we feel that that has flattened to the point that it's safe, not only for our children, but more so for our children's families and our communities. There have been students, kids that have contracted the disease and had very serious outcomes. But for the most part, any of you following the news know that it tends to be older folks with compromised health conditions. So this is much more about a community safety issue, which is why there was such a collective response. California has a ton of small districts like ours out in the middle of nowhere, and they had not been impacted in any immediate way, and they closed more for the collective good. So really it's a health concern, a health consideration. We rely very heavily on the health officials, but oftentimes when we have a situation of such magnitude, it becomes more of a collective response, which is why we're talking to all the other schools on Tuesday to get there. So I would say there's not one authority unless the authority came from the governor that says you have to shut down. And that was one of the directions we were going to once he started saying you couldn't have more than 10 people in a room. Makes it hard to run a school that way. Next question says, At some point, will the message to students be that classwork is not optional? I think that optional is causing some concerns with kids not wanting to participate because they are not required. So we put that optional out there because we couldn't assure that we would be able to provide an equitable delivery. And the other reason we put it out as optional is parents were dealing with crisis situations, just trying to figure out, how am I going to work from home? How am I going to keep my kids safe? What's happening to my family? There's a whole lot of things that in that immediate, would have been very stressful to say, this work has to be done. This work's going to be graded. You better get it done. The teacher's bugging you for it. So there's a lot of reasons why we leaned into that sort of optional work. At my house, it wasn't optional. So you are the parents and you can tell them, but you'll get more authority coming from us. When we get on the back end, we are going to be telling kids, this is the work that we expect of you. And if students don't have the ability to do it, then we look at another delivery method. So you'll probably see that virtual learning environment through a software program as being your main kind of through line. And then teachers will provide a number of other opportunities that may or may not be required. My goal in this is, people often look at this requirement as being tied to an academic grade. I am much more concerned with kids' welfare in general and their families' welfare, and then continuing that learning so that this does not become a detriment to them. Like I said at the beginning, this is clearly not school. We don't expect the same outcomes, but some will thrive and some will need to make it up. The more we do this right now, the better. And I think the more accountable kids are, and we'll tell them this is work that's expected to be done, and they'll get some feedback on it. So we'll give you that as far as a little leverage at home. So hopefully that will help. Yeah, and there's another question about things being optional. There's a question about access to library books. So we have plans in the works right now, starting next Wednesday. It happens to be April Fool's, but it is not an April Fool, is we are looking to facilitate a library checkout. And so we've got some plans in place to do that safely. What it'll look like is some folks will get their books exchanged in a drive-through in the front. Emails to Mrs. Carroll, she'll pull books for you. We'll have staff members that'll be out there that can retrieve and exchange books. That's the safest way to do it. Some won't know what they want till they get there, and we will have a plan in place where most likely you'll have about 8 people allowed in the library that have to stay about 10 feet apart from one another. But we do have some plans that we're working on to get books in the hands of kids through a checkout system. There will be some controls that'll be placed in. Coronavirus can live on paper for 5 days. So literally the books that are returned will be quarantined for a week, can't be checked out until the following week. Things that you will get from us will not be handled directly from people. That'll be folks with gloves and that kind of stuff. So you can take some solace in the fact that it will be something that wasn't just returned and was handed out with gloves. So there's a lot of procedures we're looking at. Our goal is to, number one, keep people safe. And if we could do something that keeps them safe and maintains some continuity to learning, some normalness, we'll go ahead and do that. So good question about the library. Will the Washington trip for the 8th graders still take place as planned? If not, will it be refunded? I can't say 100% because that one falls outside the school's purview, but from my expectation, although they're telling you it's on, unless something drastically changes, I'm not too sure how they're going to facilitate that. As of right now, it is still on, but I don't know what their refund policy is. I'm quite certain that if you book a trip and they can't fulfill their promise to have you go on the trip, they'll either be credit or refund, but I don't know exactly for sure. You want to talk to Apple Tours for that. I see some people happy about the reading stuff at the library. I think I've got through all the chats right now. Is anybody has any additional questions or clarifications they'd like to get? Feel free, you can click on your picture, you can click on your picture and it'll say unmute. So does anybody have any questions, comments, anything they'd like to share? I'm hearing a lot of nothing, so I'm taking that as a good sign. Oh, still waiting on it. Okay. So let's see. Another question popped in that says, once the COVID-19 is over with and the world is healthy, I like how this is starting out. How will our school take charge in stopping sick children from coming to school? Attendance is pushed. In reality, this push kids coming to school, how will it be enforced? Really good question. And that was a question that actually came up among superintendents prior to the whole shutdown. Because as you know, we encourage kids to come to school, and we are funded by them coming to school. We give them awards for coming to school. We do all this kind of stuff, pushing kids into the door. And our recommendation to the state was to reevaluate how schools are funded through attendance and really have them funded on enrollment, and then maybe have some other side benefits to getting more kids to show up. My advice and recommendation to the rollback is going to be very similar to where we ended up on the way out, which was kids that were ill were encouraged to stay home. Teachers that have ill students sent them to the office, and we sent them home. This is one of those things that we want kids to be in school. We want kids to learn. We want to get funded for them showing up at school, but it's not the most important thing. And so when we look at that, we'll have a lot of emphasis on proper hygiene, on sending kids to school the right way, the hand washing, the hand sanitizers, all that stuff that we were doing on the way out the door. We'll look to do that again on the way in. And part of that will be, we will have some assurances from health officials that it's safe to do so. But part of it is the perception. Because the piece that we really didn't talk about a whole lot was, what's the phase 3 going to look like when kids come back? There's some learning stuff that we've got to address, but there's also social emotional stuff we've got to address. And that's, how are kids feeling? Do they feel safe? Are they in a place to learn? So we're going to try to continue some things over this break to normalize that the best we can. Like I said, the library will be a nice thing for kids. I was on the in communication with the safari park. They're looking to do some virtual animal visits. ASB is probably doing a spirit week next week where kids get to dress up and send their pictures. So we're trying to do some things for kids to make it, make the abnormal less so, and to have them feel a little bit more connected. But when we come back to school, there'll be some work to do on making kids feel safe. And part of that is not having sick kids there. And we'll be taking a different stance on it than we've done before. How soon until the program is launched? I'm assuming you're talking about the Acellus program that we did. We have a couple of guinea pigs. Now that my kids are forced at home, I could make them do things and learn what's good for your kids. If you have a middle schooler and you'd like them to be part of that program, let us know and we'll get you signed up. Right now, we're figuring out what's the proper entry point for them in this program, pacing, how do we accelerate, how do we remediate? So there's a little figuring out to do, but if your kid wants to be part of that, otherwise, we expect to have online programs in place for kids on the 14th of April if we're not sitting in school. So that's really the through plan. The elementary, like I said, is a little bit undetermined because we're not so sure that a computer-based program is the best thing for our transitional kindergartners. So we're kind of looking at, is there a different model that's delivered to our younger kids versus our older? But we were pretty, we were certain that we knew we needed it for our middle. We've got some of our upper elementary teachers training on the program right now because we feel it's going to be a good fit there. And some of the primary stuff could look a little different. But what I really am excited about is having a backbone program that runs through, but also not taking away some of the good stuff that's been working. You know, I've seen some amazing things from our teachers, from kindergarten read-alouds to at-home science experiments to all that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure that we keep the positive in that we've been doing, but still provide some consistency. Looking at questions right now, let's see, we have a question that says, are there resources for kids who are currently feeling emotional in this crisis? And the answer to that is yes. All of our staff right now is considered on call. And so you will see teachers engaging with you throughout the day. If you have some students that have specialized services, the people that normally engage with them will be engaging with them virtually. That would include our school counselor, who, if you have a kid that's having some troubles, let us know. There's some resources we can refer you to. We have an MOU, an agreement, with a company called Care Solace. And what Care Solace does is it's essentially a referral service to those referral program to those types of services. But we have staff that, if they can't sit in the same room, they can do something like this and have a conversation with kids about what's going on and maybe give them some strategies to deal with it. So if you're having some kids that are having some emotional problems, reach out to us, because this is a tough time for adults to deal with. It's hard to imagine what this feels like if you're 5 or 6 years old. It's a pretty frightening time. I have somebody in here saying Apple Tours emailed on 3/13 saying you can get a refund minus $250, and they'll give you 7 days notice if they change that refund policy. So it sounds like they are giving some refunds for that. I don't think they should keep your $250, but that's what they're saying. Getting into these questions. Is this chat recorded? Yes. If I did it right, which is the first time I'm trying, it should be recorded, and we'll have it posted on the school's YouTube account. So if people have any about that. So the chat is being recorded. And let me go through here. Is there a way to gauge how our children doing with schoolwork at this time, or do we have to wait till after the break? Yeah, talk to the teachers, talk to your child's teacher about that. Because these activities are optional and they're not being required, teachers really aren't keeping track. What we're finding is that depending on the age group, we're finding about a 50% heavy participation rate. So if your kids are engaged most of the time, they're in good company, because half the kids aren't doing it. We are finding a lot of inconsistencies, and what we're finding is that the teachers who are engaging kids socially first, kind of getting them into a group like this, allowing them to see one another, to show off their pets, all sorts of stuff like that, are finding it much easier to engage them academically afterwards. And so you'll see some stuff that really looks like, hey, kids just messing around. If you can get them connected that way, you're more likely to get them connected in others. But I would talk to your child's teachers about what the expectations are, because all teachers do have expectations for what kids are supposed to be doing. But it'd be helpful to touch base with them to find out for sure if your child's getting there. Parent sharing on the Zoom session that included all the kids in the class. Can this be done on a more frequent basis? Group projects, learning opportunities? Yeah, that'll be one of our conversations with our, normally when we roll out these kind of technologies, we have all sorts of training and professional development, and we go into a lot of detail about how to use it. We essentially said, here's your tool, here's a 5-minute YouTube video, go for it. And so some teachers are still learning it and applying it. I do expect all teachers do have Zoom accounts and can continue doing that. So I do expect that a lot of teachers will be using that. And we're going to set, as I mentioned earlier, some expectations with our staff as far as kind of how often you can expect it and giving you some tools to do it with. If kids remain at home for the balance of the year, will grading commence to assess if the child is ready for the next year? Yeah, that would be part of our plan on the back into school. And this will happen either this year or when we get back at the beginning of next year, is figuring out where kids are at. You may have heard the state canceled all their state testing. So the big test that allows us to compare ourselves and our progress to everyone else is canceled. And so it'll be up to us to use some of our internal measures to figure out where kids are. And it'll be important for us to know that so that we have an understanding as to what kids need and we have an understanding of where we can focus. Like I said, the programs we have in place should really help. Stephanie Jones put into the chat box a link for folks that are looking for emotional supports. So that would be a good place to start. We got a question from the library. If your students know what books they'd like, please email those requests Monday night along with their lunch numbers to Carol, and she'll have them pulled for you. Like I said, Wednesday, we expect to have library open. We'll get you a lot of information about that. It says, because the current assignments offered are optional, will the required assignments when on learning is up be repetitive to those students already doing the optional learning? Unlikely. There'll be some repeats if it's a core skill that teachers wanted them to learn. For the most part, teachers were rolling out lots of opportunities. Many of those were enrichment, extension, engagement type things. You may see some repetition, but since we're rolling out with a new software program for all kids, I think you'll get some new learning in. I don't see as much of the overlap. Library, they're looking for the library's email address. That's been posted in there. So it's julie.carroll@sanpasqualeunion.net for specific book requests. And taking a look in here. I think I got to the bottom. Hopefully I didn't miss any questions. Anybody have any questions they would like to add in? Mrs. Mahalski added in there that asking a question about preferences as far as Zoom accounts. Instead of using the school's account, it said, would you prefer that kids have their parents download a free Zoom account using their email instead of the school one? It's an interesting thing on Zoom, and this is a good time to bring it up, is we're introducing our staff to a lot of technologies, which is introducing your kids to a lot of technologies. So it's important to kind of keep an eye on that. The kids are not issued Zoom accounts, so that staff can have Zoom accounts to set up these meetings. However, your more resourceful middle schoolers have already realized that they can go get a free one and talk to their friends and do all sorts of stuff. So just continue. There's nothing nefarious about it, but you just want to make sure that you keep an eye on what your kids are doing while they're online. There's a question that says, are there upcoming meetings? My plan was to have one about this time next week and go from there to give you a little bit. Miguel, you have a question?
Yeah, I did. First of all, it's great to see everybody in their working best clothes. I will say much props to all you stay-at-home moms, because working from home in leggings is very, very difficult. And then third is, are we doing anything as far as is there a forum to kind of help out the local businesses around the area by say food delivery, or, this might help everybody else as well. There's a beer delivery that I found that's a local brewery here in San Marcos that's delivering, just there's all these small little restaurants that could probably, I'm sure everybody's tired of tacos and pasta. So, to just kind of throw something in there on the mix would be fantastic. Is there a forum where we could throw this information out, or just email the school and then the school sends it out via Peach Jar or something along those lines? Or just basically it's something that we can do to help out the community or the small businesses around us, aside from school.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I know that the Escondido Rotary is putting together a list, but if you were to send that to me, into Peach Jar, because it really is, this is one of those times where people got to come together, and I really appreciate the sentiment. I think the school would be a good way to get that information out. So yeah, why don't you, if you've got specific ones, Miguel, send it. If you others have folks on the local side that we want to support, we'd be happy to put that out for you. It looks like we have a couple questions that might have popped in here. Question says, if our 8th graders won't be coming back to SPU next year, how long will they be evaluated to know they're academically prepared for high school? We may not get an opportunity to have them in front of us. We'll get some good information from our online programs, but we tend to have a feeling that all of our 8th graders are ready for high school. We tend to move them along. The good news is our 8th grade class as a whole is a very high performing group. And I think many of them will thrive in this type of environment if we do have some constraints to hold them accountable. Our 8th graders routinely outperform most kids from neighboring schools who will be in a similarly deficited school situation. So it's going to be interesting for the high school. We're going to have our challenge with kids rolling in for us for every grade but 8th grade. But the high school will have the same challenge in that every school locally has been shut down. And quite honestly, our kids have been engaged more academically than any of our neighbors. So I'm pretty confident we're going to get them where they need to be. But like I said at the beginning, it's just not going to be the same as regular school. So we will do some assessments on that. We get down into here. Is there anything we can do to help the kids at San Pasqual Academy? Very good question. We're in communication with them about getting some computers out there. Their latest plans is to have a number of those kids go with families that they often go on pass to. So a number of the kids that live there, they don't have others that are taking full custody of them, but they do have family members that they go to on weekends or holidays or so forth. And the last I heard is they were putting some plans in place to try to do so with those kids. But we'll be in communication with them. Pamela, if you could put a little note for us to follow up to see if there's anything in particular that we can do. And thank you guys for thinking of them. We're all dealing with hard stuff in different ways, and they've had some hard stuff already. If we get into question, looks like there is, Ms. Mahalski had shared that her daughter's volleyball team have created a thing to patronize local businesses. So maybe if you shared that, we can pass that along as well. And if we combine that with the Rotary stuff and some ideas you guys have, we can look to support others in our community. If school does not resume, is there a creative way we can make 8th grade promotion a special event? And I have a self-interest in that with 2 8th graders of my own. And I was thinking about that today, about what that would look like virtually or what that would look like distanced. A lot of things to look at. So I think there are creative ways to do that. Probably about 98 people on this are more creative than me. So somebody will come up with a great idea. But I do think we need to recognize them, because if we can't bring them all together, we need to find a way to kind of have this as a special thing. Along those lines, we are still looking to publish our yearbook this year. So you'll see some things that'll come out to you as far as soliciting of pictures. And granted, there will be a section in the yearbook that shows your homeschool. So if you're okay sending some pictures of your kids learning at home, send them in. Just starting to collect those. You'll see that in Peach Jar, some things on how to send those in. 8th grade baby pictures as well. So we're, like I said, we're going to try to continue as many of the things that are normal the best we can. Question that says, is there a way, let me get this on the screen. There are other events that are being missed. BizTown in 5th grade, Legoland field trip that was in the 1st grade, I believe. Any way we can do those later would help emotional support knowing it's still coming. So I'll take those two separately. The BizTown one is going to be a challenge simply because BizTown shut down and they will have to rebook everyone. So our expectation is that the kids have done a lot of front end work. They're ready to go. And right now it's closed and will be for the foreseeable future. So our goal would be to get those kids there. The Legoland stuff is a lot easier to make up. That falls on a field trip side of things. So I would imagine that one's going to be a lot easier to make up than the BizTown one. Some other things people have asked about. Kids have already auditioned and we're getting ready for the variety show. That was supposed to be coming up. I think it was going to be this Friday. Those are some things that if school opens up, we can pull those together, or possibly we put it at the beginning of next year or have a big giant one. So a lot of this is going to be play by ear. The places that we go will be a little bit challenged just based on schedule because they are also closed down. Can BizTown be done early in 6th grade? Possibly. A lot of that will have to do with their scheduling. I don't know exactly how they schedule. My preference would be not to have these opportunities that kids have worked for be taken away. So we'll look to see if we could do that. I think we've got to the end of those questions. Anybody else either have a question they'd like to share? If you click on your unmute button, you can share it directly, or anything, any other comments or things that you guys need. I'll be soliciting a little bit more from you guys when we start making these plans as to get an idea of what's working really well for you. And what I've heard from many of you is that the teachers that have reached out and done Zoom and connected and there's been a face-to-face interaction has been really helpful. And we want to leverage that into the learning. We have a question that says, will these informational chats be held regularly? Answer is yes. I'm gonna look at the schedule. Plan to get one out late next week after I know some more from meeting with the county folks. Had a suggestion that was kind of neat. Maybe have a virtual variety show. Kids could send in their acts. That could be fun. Get down to the bottom here. As far as supporting folks, El Plantillo has fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh picked avocados if you're looking for that. And I think I've got to the end of your questions. Anybody else have anything they want to share? I'll go through the picture.
Mark, I have one.
Yeah.
As far as I know, Candace asked about 8th grade promotion, like a special event. Have we considered or thought about doing like a Zoom for 8th graders and their parents, but do it like in separate chunks? Because if there's 100 max limit, like you could do a Zoom promotion, but in like alphabet or separate chunks of students. You're muted.
I'm very optimistic that we will find a way to do it. I just don't know exactly how. And I think between now and then, we'll be able to figure out some creative ways to do that. But I think your point is well taken, in that if we hit our 100 max, my other thought is we might be able to stream something through another source, you know, Facebook or something along those lines. But we just want to make sure that people are accessible and that kids get something that they can remember. I have a feeling their promotion is more memorable than any of ours, so it'll be interesting. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Oh, I think we got one down here at the bottom. Do we make appointments to visit the library? We'll get you information out about the library. The plan on it is we'll probably have a morning and an afternoon 2-hour window. If you send your requests to Mrs. Carroll, you know what you want, we'll deliver those to you in the pickup zone in the front. Otherwise, we'll take people in small chunks. Reason we separated it out was so we can have less people together, because our goal is to make sure that we don't bring folks together unnecessarily. So you don't have to make an appointment, but it would be good for you to check out your books. And there was a thing saying we can upgrade our Zoom. I'll have to talk to Jeff about that.
Yeah.
And
I had a question. Danielle Sergi here. Hi, everybody. I think it was addressed like getting iPads to families in need, but a step beyond that was kind of on my heart when we had the Christmas tree to buy gifts for families who were in dire need. Is there like a donation or is there a way that you guys could facilitate that? Because we don't know who those families are. If people in our community wanted to donate, like through food gift cards or just through money.
yeah, we'll look at that. It would be very similar, I believe, to how we've done, just like you said, the Thanksgiving drives and the holiday drives. So we'll talk to some folks who've spearheaded those and see if we can kind of get something together. I don't know what the identified needs are yet, but
Okay.
you alluded to it. I'm sure they're there.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
All right. Anybody have any other thoughts? If not, we will close this up. I am very accessible. Where I'm sitting right now is where I spend most of my day. And so email me if you have any questions. Be happy to get back to you individually. There'll be some sort of a message coming out for me probably Wednesday of next week with what we know as far as our guidance from health and folks. And then we'll look to schedule something like this again to answer any questions, probably Thursday or Friday next week. But I'll take a look at the calendar and see what we're looking at. There was a question that says, when are you going to address state testing? I had a parent asked how skipping the test this year will affect data in upcoming years. So the answer is oh, that was a private one, sorry. I'll make it public. So state testing, essentially, no kids are being tested across the board. It's going to be kind of a lost year as far as our ability to use the state's information and use it comparatively to others. The good news is we have a fairly robust internal system of assessments. And once we get the kids back, we do have the ability to where they were when they left and where they are when they come back. And so we'll be able to gauge that on our end, but they won't be in place statewide. And so when you get your reports about your kids, they will be missing this year as far as the state testing is concerned. So,
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Just want to say, hey, thanks to you, your staff, the teachers, the parents, PTO, everybody at the school that's been pretty phenomenal with all this. I mean, it is unprecedented times, and none of us have trained for this in the past. So, totally appreciate that. And I also want to say that it's great to see the community still doing community things, and everybody just kind of showing patience. And, if anybody has any extra toilet paper, we'll take some. But with that being said, thanks everybody.
All right, thank you, Miguel. Good sentiment to end on. This is the time to stick together. Know from the school's vantage point, our decisions are all made with the kids at the forefront. So if we are making decisions that aren't putting kids first, remind us of that. And if you have some suggestions on how to do it better, we'll take it. We're traveling down a road that nobody's been down before. And I'm confident that we've made some good decisions so far, but there's going to be some big ones coming up. So thank you guys all very much. Like I said, reach out to me if you have any specific questions. And I appreciate you all taking time with me this morning. And we'll be in touch real soon. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.